Hello, I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein. Welcome to Interior Design, The New Freedom. Our guest today is Mario Boata, interior designer or interior decorator or space planner. What's the difference and how do you identify yourself?
It's a very thin line, and I say decoration is somewhat of an old-fashioned term. And I think today a lot of decorating or design students who've come out of schools have learned a great deal more about coping with the interior structures of buildings rather than decorating them. I think in the old days, buildings were built, architects put in all of the embellishments. There were moldings, there were fancy windows. I mean, there was everything you could think of. I mean, there might have been pediments, not pediments, but, well, there might have been pediments over the door, or columns, or pilasters, or whatever. Today, one gets an apartment, you buy a house, it's devoid of any embellishment. There isn't a molding, there isn't a pilaster, there's barely a fireplace. I mean, you might find a mantel if you're lucky. So that one has to start from the bottom, and so they've sort of redefined what they're doing.
Is that why you've said that even decorators need decorators?
Whether you're a designer or a decorator, we all need someone to help us. We all need another set of eyes, another pair of eyes, or someone else to come in and sort of edit what we're thinking about it, what we're doing.
Did you ever feel that you needed one? What could a decorator do for you, though?
All the time, lots.
For example?
Well, another decorator can inspire you to do something that you hadn't thought of, or he or she can, just by looking at what they've done or how they've treated something, you just get another point of view, and it's sort of nice to see the way they might have done it. Quite oftentimes, a client, you've worked on a house for a very long time, and you go stale. You suddenly think, well, what am I going to do next? You know, and maybe you've got to go away for a little while and come back. It's this whole thing about not trying to do it all at once.
Well, you live and work in a very fine Federal Georgian-style house on Manhattan's Upper East Side. In the walls of your library office, they're filled with Victorian paintings of dogs, lots of dogs, and a collection of vegetables and fruits and various forms in porcelain. How did you come to be so interested in animals and in vegetables?
Well, it's very interesting. A lot of that has to do with being a human being. I mean, having sort of wanting the feeling of living in the country and yet living in the city. Here I am living in the city. I was brought up in a house that was very contemporary. I mean, contemporary in the sense of it was a 30s house my parents built after they were married, and it was furnished with glass and steel and chrome, all the sort of things that are terribly popular today.
How did you come to collect so many dogs? Do you have a real live dog as well?
I think in the city it's so unfair to have an animal, unless you can walk them and they have a place to run, or you can take them to the country on weekends.
So you prefer looking at them?
I prefer looking at them on the walls, yeah. It's a lot easier. You don't have to wash up, you don't have to feed them, it's a lot simpler.
Well, as you point out, we've obviously been influenced with, among other things, with the surroundings where we were raised by and large. And here you were in Staten Island, surrounded by chrome and steel. How did you live? What was life like there that brought your work to such a romantic and embellished and very English kind of appearance?
I found that my parents had all of these modern things. My mother hated anything old. She didn't like anything that was, unless it belonged to her family, or the things that she'd sort of taken along. But by and large, they liked to think modern and live modern. I mean, that was the whole point. And my mother's sister had a house that was somewhat of an English country house, and it was filled with what I used to call Thomas Chippendale furniture, and Oriental and chinoiserie, which I used to call chinoiserie. I mean, it's just crazy, or vice versa. But all of these things I admired so much as a child, and my uncle was an architect, and I was very much interested in architecture and influenced by what he was doing at the time. It had it had more to do with tradition rather than to do with contemporary in those days. And so that what I found myself doing was spending a great deal of time at my aunt's house, and she was always decorating, and she had a decorator come out, and we'd go on shopping trips into town, and we'd have a great old time, and I loved her, and she gave me a great deal that I wasn't getting at home in that part of my life.
Well, one of the influences, since I've read so much really about you and seen references to your aunt and her house, was that every room in her house was decorated in a different period. That is an unusual point of view for a professional decorator, but it's also one that from time to time you ascribe to.
So much of it had to do with travel. I think in the old days, people traveled and they went off to China and they'd come back and suddenly they'd want a Chinese room added onto their house, or perhaps they'd go to England. Well, maybe they were, let's say they were English in the first place. But so many of the houses, great houses in England that have so many of these wonderful rooms where you go in and you see it, suddenly you see a Chinese room and suddenly you'll see it, you know, sort of somewhat of an Italian, whatever. I mean,
but that's when very few people traveled, and now when many of us have the opportunity to travel, does that same international and cultivated view reflect the way we live?
I think it does, but in a lesser sense, because I think in the old days you traveled much less. It took you longer to get there, and you spent maybe more time there and a lot of time getting back, and you wanted to cherish all of that, cherish what you'd seen. So you'd see a lot of people reproducing rooms or houses that they'd seen in their travels. I think today it's so easy to get on a plane and go to London that people don't even think about it very much. I think they're too mobile. I think
you've said that every room should tell a story. If we were to look at your very beautiful library and office, what would that room tell us about you? Let's say perhaps you look around and you can tell my presence might still be in that room because everything about me is in that room. It's telling a story about the way I am. Well, why don't we be specific about that room, that beautiful red, lacquer red secretary filled with all of that porcelain. How did that come about? It certainly wasn't an instant collection, nor was that blue and white porcelain. It's taken about 20 years. It's taken all my life, actually. I started out collecting when I was 12 years old. I bought my first, it was a Sheridan writing box, which I knew nothing about. It was $12. I saved up my allowance, and I thought I'm going to buy that box, and I paid for it $2 a week or whatever. And there it was. But that's always the way it's been. I've always collected. I've had a thing about collecting things, and it's kind of a romance in itself, you know. But I think mainly, when my first trip to Europe as a student with the Parsons School, I got to really be in one of these great English houses, and I realized exactly what I'd been missing or what I really liked about it. And what I love about the English is that they travel a great deal, and in their travels they collect things and they bring things back. And so a lot of their rooms tell stories. And let's say, for example, just think about an English house, for example, lived in by maybe 7 or 8 generations, added to each time by each generation, and becoming more and more embellished. In any case, what happens... What if they're not good design and they just represent nostalgia? I don't think that really matters. I think it's important that the people living in them are happy. I think that's the thing that's more important. Tell us how a fellow from Staten Island becomes, in the short, less than 20 years that you have been in your own practice, becomes the decorator to the rich and famous, including some very distinguished tastemakers themselves, ranging from the president of Bendel's, Geraldine Stutz, to one of your current assignments, a new house for Henry Ford. How did that all come about? That's usually word of mouth. That's the best publicity you can possibly have. You can have all the pictures in the world in magazines, and if people don't happen to see them at that time, but they do happen to walk into a room that you've done and they feel a certain association with that room. And they feel comfortable in that room? So then, sometimes I think that it must be tough for decorators, because when a client comes to you, what they've seen is, and what they want, is your last job. And I would imagine what you'd like to do is your next job. How do you bring the client along? I think one of the things about my work is that I really don't force myself on a client. I've done some pretty awful stuff in my day. When I look back, I mean, there are things that I could never have, would never think of. Yes, me. Like what? Like what don't you want to claim anymore? Like an apartment I did for a singer once, a Broadway singer, who she had come to me through a very conservative client, and this was my first chance to work for someone in show business. And she wanted yellow walls in the living room, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. I said, I think yellow would be very nice. And we painted the walls yellow, and she came home that night after the show and screaming on the telephone about how I hadn't carried out her assignment. I asked for yellow walls, yellow room, and I want the ceilings yellow and the woodwork yellow and the windows yellow. So we painted everything yellow. The next day we painted her bedroom, and it was a butterfly paper with little yellow sort of blue and white flowers with yellow butterflies. That was it. And we papered the walls. My favorite color combination. And that's a story too. But
paper was applied to the walls. It was hung that day. She came home that night, and again, I had a phone call thinking, haha, she's very delighted. She likes her paper. She didn't like the paper at all. She said, where's the paper? She said, I want the ceiling papered, I want the doors papered, and I want the furniture papered. And I said, but you're going to lose everybody in that. She said, that's the point. She said, I don't want anybody to get out once they're in there.
Perhaps you became a bit undone by your showbiz clients since you have such a background in that. The fact is that your father was a society band leader. Do you ever think of yourself as an entertainer?
No, not really. I think we have to be, I think in our business we have to be part entertainer, part psychiatrist. Very much of a hand holder, you know, kind of.
Here you have a small office, a small staff, one assistant, one secretary, and it's contrasted to a lot of other contemporary designers or decorators. You do want to keep it that way. But with that kind of limited staff, how many clients can you have each year, and how do you choose them, or do they choose you, and how does it all work out?
Lots of people call all the time, and a lot of people aren't terribly serious about it. A lot of people are shopping for a decorator.
Any successful and celebrated decorator such as yourself obviously has the opportunity for more clients than you can possibly manage. How do you choose?
People come to me because they want to work with me. Now, I'm not saying that I'm the greatest decorator in the world and I can do everything or anything. I'm not for everybody. I'm only for a small segment of people, you know, out there who can understand what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to do for them. And basically, I'm trying to bring their point of view out in helping them with their houses. This is where I said I'm embarrassed about some of the things I have done, but the people who live in them are happy, and that's what's important.
How much do you learn from a client in general?
Great deal. I've had several clients that the relationship has been so incredible in the sense that we've helped each. I mean, the house just blossomed. I mean, it was like a garden that you'd worked on for 2 or 3 years, and then suddenly it had its most wonderful season, and everything just came to life. And that happens very rarely because people don't often open up, you know, enough to sort of accept what you're thinking and to open up enough to give you, you know, to tell you what's behind their kind of thinking about what they're doing.
And what's the catalyst that makes that room come to life? What's the most important thing?
Well, I think the people are. I think it's who you're working with. I mean, you can pull a scheme together or pull a room together, and it'll look like something that appears in a magazine or maybe in a showroom in a department store. The point that what we're trying to work with here is work with all the different facets of one's life, bringing out all the things that they like. For example, you talk about my apartment and you say, well, you've got collections of dogs and botanical prints and cabbages and different forms, whether they be painted on canvas or paper or three-dimensional. They're things that mean a great deal to me. You know, I couldn't possibly go out and redo that room tomorrow for someone like yourself. Let's say you came to me and said, well, I love this. Well, unless you married me, which I don't think you're prepared to do.
You haven't asked.
No. We would have a big problem. No, but the point is, because you can't, those are things that happened over a period of time. The red lacquer bureau, you know, the bureau bookcase you speak of, I bought in England 12 years ago. It was just a whim. I mean, I liked it, I saw it, I liked it, and I bought it for a job. It didn't happen to work out, and I got stuck with it, and it now has a happy place. The point, all of these things tell a story. They're all things that maybe I've picked up on my travels, things that people have given me, or, you know, they're just things you walk into. They become a part of you.
Well, let's say a couple comes to you, or a person comes to you without any possessions, and let's complicate it, and a limited budget, but they have more taste than funds. And sometimes that can be challenging too.
It can be challenging, and it can also be very pleasing to work with someone like that and do work on the house over a period of time, because it does take years. I like to think of decorating a house the way an artist paints a picture, perhaps a dab at a time on the canvas until the composition, you know, comes together and it's pleasing. It's important to think about that. There's no such thing as decorating a room in 6 weeks or 6 months and saying it's finished, because no room is ever finished. I mean, they continue to go on. It should be a growing, you know, thing that lives. It should live with you. I always said this to my mother, because I said, this is supposed to be a living room, and I said, it's the deadest room in the house. I said, you can't walk on the carpet, it makes marks. You can't sit on the furniture, you have to fluff up the down pillows. I said, what's the point of having this room?
Well, how do we begin this long process of decorating an apartment or a house, particularly when the funds are limited, and one is willing to let the space, the environment evolve, but really doesn't want to live in a bare space? Do you start with a few good pieces of furniture? Do you start with a rug? Do you start with a picture?
I think you start with the backgrounds. I think the architecture is very important. Getting the doors in the right place, adding any moldings, taking out, subtracting any moldings, changing the entrance to a room, perhaps heightening the door or widening it, adding bookcases, making all the structural changes, then doing the backgrounds, the painting of the room, certainly the best paint job you can afford. If you're
You
going
would do the best paint job before you even bought that one good chair.
Well, only because I think if you do a really fine paint job, let's say, for example, you spend a great deal of time in preparing the walls, canvassing the walls, preparing them, and perhaps glazing the walls, in time that's only going to get better as it gets older. It's not going to have to be redone in a period of 5 years or so. I mean,
Well, let's talk about our budget friends for a moment. They don't
Okay.
even know if they're going to be in that apartment for 5 years, and they'd rather invest the money in their possessions rather than improving their landlord's property. What do they start with?
Well, if there's a chance to change architecturally, then it's a nice thing to do, because none of us want to leave behind things that cost a great deal of money and leave them for the landlord. If the case is, in fact, that you can't make any changes or don't want to, then you work with what you have, and maybe perhaps in one of these modern buildings, paint everything the same color, that being the ceiling and walls, woodwork, etc., either a light or dark color. Then buying the best possible upholstered pieces you can afford to buy at the time, because your upholstery, in that case, become the bones of the room. These are the things that you're going to have for a long time and have to work around. Then after that, you add your tables and lamps and chairs, etc., etc.
What's the room that you prefer?
I like pretty bedrooms. I think bedrooms are terribly important. It's a place where most people spend more time than they really think about, than they think that they do. Because if we're city people, we come home from a tough day at the office, and it's a very gray city, and you want to come home to a very cheerful kind of an apartment.
What's the ideal bedroom for you?
A large, comfortable bed. I think preferably a canopy bed. I think there's nothing nice. I personally feel there's nothing nicer than canopy beds.
Why?
Well, it's just a nice way to sort of wake up in the morning and fall asleep at night.
Sense of drama again.
Not really. I mean, it's something about waking up in a big king-size bed in the middle of a room that you feel as though you're kind of in the middle of nowhere.
And are there desks and dining areas in your bedroom?
Well, there haven't been any dining rooms to date, but people, I mean, there usually is maybe a sofa in a corner, or there might be a sofa in a bay window, whatever, where one could have breakfast and maybe entertain. The idea of eating in the bedroom and sleeping in the bedroom, I don't find terribly attractive myself.
Have you given up on dining rooms? Do you think they're no longer as relevant as they were?
No, I think if you've got the space, I think they're wonderful. I think it's a great luxury in New York today to have a dining room. A lot of people are taking their dining rooms and turning them into dining room libraries or
Think that's a good
sitting
idea?
rooms. I think it's a very good idea, because it is a waste of space. In a New York apartment where you're, say, limited to maybe 3 or 4 rooms, and you have a dining room, I think it's a total waste of space. Unless you entertain a great deal and you want to use that room for such.
Well, lots of decorators have given up on curtains. They think of that as something of another period, largely because of the maintenance and the realities of city life. But you're not one of those.
Not one of those. I think curtains are very important. I think curtains are become architected to the rooms. Curtains help soften that space, and they can help soften the lines of a room. They also, I hate to tell you this, but they're finding out, a lot of these people who weren't using curtains are finding out the curtains are keeping out a lot of the drafts and a lot of the cold, so the curtains will be coming back. The same way I've seen a lot of the architects, designers today using color. Color has come back suddenly. I mean, you find a lot of interiors are being painted with pastel colors, pastel furnishings. You know, the sort of white and black and white and gray room is sort of becoming a thing of the past, and color is suddenly coming in. And all of this is terribly important. But a lot of this has to do with swaying. A lot of architects and designers and decorators don't ever sway. They have a point of view that becomes very non-elastic, and they don't realize that, you know, you can't be a star today and say, well, this is the way it's going to be. People won't take that. People want to be treated like you're working for them and you're doing what they want and what's going to make them happy. There's no point in having something that doesn't reflect that feeling.
If one of the purposes of the designer is to help people, how do you keep from intimidating them with all that good taste?
I personally feel that what is good taste to you is not good taste to me, and if you feel that you look great in, whatever. You like a blue room or a gray room, and you like whatever, and you feel that it's right for you, it's right for you. Who am I to say that it isn't right? I mean, who is anybody to say?
But isn't that part of your professional role,
Yes.
to make a judgment, to give
Yes, it
advice,
is.
to
It
take a
is.
stand?
I can give advice, but if people don't take it, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Just go ahead, I'm sorry.
We know that there are regional differences in taste, but are there regional differences in good taste? For example, you've done jobs in Ohio and Michigan and so on. Do you find varying interpretations of what is good taste?
I think people are very much influenced by what they see in magazines. I think the magazines have done a great deal to sway people in the way they want to live or the way they think they want to live. I think it has nothing to do with the real them. But going back to good taste, I think good design is more important.
Has anything ever occurred that would cause you to leave a job or have you
sure.
excused from a job? What's the sort of thing that occurs?
Yellow butterflies and blue and white paper all over a room.
That'll do it every time?
That was one of the things that did it. If you come to a point with a client and you're on a job and you realize that you're just not going to see eye to eye, and they don't understand what you're doing or what you're trying to do, and you don't understand what they're thinking about or how they even think the job out, then there's no point in going on. It's like a marriage that doesn't work. And decorating, the sort of rapport between a client and a decorator is terribly important, because most of my clients go back 17 years from when I first started. I'm still working for these people.
So that a good part of one's work is not only taking on clients, but redoing the work of ongoing clients.
Exactly.
Actually,
and adding to them, bettering them, changing.
It could be a lifetime, full-time effort. And that's
Well,
what one
it is.
hopes for.
It is, exactly, exactly.
Perhaps you should tell us, in your own words this time, what you think the hallmarks or the identifying aspects of a Mario Boata job are.
Well, usually mass confusion. It takes me a long time to get started.
Is that true?
Well, it does, because...
Well, how do you begin?
Well, you try to get inside the mind of your client. And when I was younger and when I had a great deal more time, I used to spend perhaps a weekend at a client's house, and I'd learn to live the way they lived, and I'd learn to realize what the movements were. They were out playing tennis on Saturday morning, and so they had an early breakfast, and they liked breakfast in the breakfast room, or they liked to use the dining room or the kitchen or whatever, however this all worked out. And all of these things became terribly important. Their sleeping habits, et cetera, et cetera.
Why don't you tell us 4 or 5 things that if we walked into a Mario Boata room, apartment house, that we would know had the hallmark of your sensibility?
Color. I like to use lots of color. Lots of pleasant colors that are pleasing to the eye. Comfort, I would say. I'm a great advocate of very comfortable rooms that look as though you just want to sit down the minute you walked in. Certainly, personality of the client coming forth, the fact that the room does look like the client lives there or owns it, even though you may not agree with what he or she has. The fact that it does reflect that particular person who's living in it. I guess I would say it with comfort and color.
And collections.
Well, not really, because everybody doesn't collect. I mean, that's a very personal point of view. A lot of people don't collect, and collections are not a part of every room. I mean, it's something that it's nice to have a collection, or have a client who has a collection and has a point of view in that respect. But then again, you're getting into something which can also be very difficult, because collectors are very difficult people. They like having their things exhibited in a certain way that it's either an intellectual collection, or it's a collection where they're collected for the sake of investment, works of art, furniture, but they can be detrimental to a room, because you find that a client is suddenly brought in an antique shop and you don't know what to do with all these pieces. He's got pieces from all different periods, or 17 chairs that don't fit into the room, and you wonder what you're going to do with them all. It's not easy. It's not an easy job being a decorator, I can tell you that.
And why do you look so cheerful?
Well, it all comes in what I said before. It's gauging. You have to gauge yourself.
There must be some jobs that you've done that especially please you. Which would you most want to be known for?
Well, I love my own apartment, and I've loved, I have several jobs in the country, various parts of the New York area country, people that I've worked for that I've liked very much. I like the present job I'm working on now.
Is that the Detroit job?
Yeah.
Since that's going to be so widely published, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, it's very much of an English country house feeling. They live in England part of the year, and so they very much like the feeling of what English country houses, the sort of feeling of lots of color, flowers, fresh flowers, warmth, a fireplace roaring, and all that sort of thing that makes a house, and the sort of smells, I mean, all those sort of things that make it work so well.
Well, you have done that in another way, and that is in another room in your home office. You have done, I guess, at least what this woman's fantasy is, what a decorator should do for a client, because there you have every imaginable textile fabric rug that reflects your taste. Why don't you describe what that room is like?
Well, it's a little thing I learned years ago, because I've always worked out of a closet. You know, all these years that I've been in the business, I've always had little tiny closet areas to work out of. And this was my first chance that I really had an office, and to spread everything out, and everything over the years had to be terribly organized. Plastic boxes for everything you could think of, so that each of the plastic boxes holds every which kind of material that we use, whether they be samples of wood, samples of glass, samples of fabric, window shades, window blinds, paint samples, and all of these things need to be in one place where you can find them. And so in that particular room, you see that all of the things are organized by color, so that all the paint colors are together by color, all the fabrics are together by color, and all the various sort of pillows and objects and things that I might need to finish a room would be there to sort of help things move along swiftly, But it has to be organized. Organization is very important.
One of the things that struck me about that room, and I'm talking about your workshop, is that appears to have evolved as well. Something that has evolved over a long period of time. Implicit in that view is that decoration is not fashion, that colors do not change, that there is not a great shift in emphasis. Is that accurate about the way you feel?
It's accurate about the way I feel. I've never changed. I've had the same chintz in my sitting room with the dogs that I've had since 1962. I've never changed. I've moved 4 times, and each time I moved, I just added onto the curtains either this way or that way, so that they've been with me. They're like old friends.
Are you that enterprising with your clients' curtains too?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah,
But so many people revive periods. The 50s and the 60s seem next. Where will you be then?
Right here in 1980.
And what's your next job?
In the 80s, rather, I should say. Pardon me?
And what is your next job? Is there a particular assignment that you have in mind, or you wish that you could do?
Not really. I think I'd like to take a little rest. I think that's what I'd really like to do at the moment.
Thank you, Mario Boata, for being part of today's program. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein for Interior Design, The New Freedom.